He did not remember falling, but the white dog remembered where home was. Rain whispered through the longleaf pines outside Camp Lejeune, turning the narrow training trail into a ribbon of black mud and shining roots. Corporal Darius Hayes lay still beneath a canopy of wet branches, his breath shallow, one hand pressed against the soaked leaves as if trying to hold on to the earth itself. The evening had started as a routine conditioning route after medical evaluation, 3 quiet miles along the edge of the base where the forest met the wire fence and the air smelled of pine sap, salt, and coming weather. Darius had insisted he could handle it. He was 29, a black United States Marine with a steady voice, broad shoulders, and the kind of quiet discipline that made younger Marines straighten when he entered a room. But recovery has its own command structure, and pain does not always salute when told to stand down. Somewhere near the Low Creek crossing, his strength had folded under him. No shouting. No drama. Just a sudden blur of rain, a knee in the mud, the trees turning sideways, and then the sound of his own breathing becoming far away. For several minutes, the forest held him in a gray silence broken only by dripping needles and the soft rush of water in the ditch below. Then something moved through the trees. At first it was only a pale shape between trunks, quiet as fog, stepping over roots with careful pause. A white German Shepherd K9 emerged from the rain, his thick coat silvered by water, his amber eyes fixed on the man in the mud. Around his neck hung a dark collar with a metal tag that flashed whenever lightning softened behind the clouds. The dog stopped 3 feet away, studying Darius with the calm focus of an animal trained to read the smallest changes in breath, scent, and fear. He did not bark. He lowered his head, sniffed once near Darius's shoulder, then pressed his cold nose against the Marine's hand. Darius stirred, barely. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused beneath rain on his lashes. "Where did you come from?" he whispered. The dog's ears tilted forward. The tag under his collar tapped once against the metal ring. Darius tried to sit up and failed, pain tightening his face before he could hide it. The K9 moved closer, turned his body sideways, and leaned carefully into Darius's chest, offering balance without pushing too hard. It was a strange thing, almost impossible to explain later. The dog did not act like a stray. He acted like a partner arriving late to a mission, but determined to finish it. Darius gripped the dog's wet fur, not enough to hurt him, only enough to understand he was real. The shepherd stood firm. Rain rolled down his white back. His paws sank into the mud. Still, he did not shift away. "All right," Darius breathed. "All right, boy. Give me a second." But the dog did not give him a second. He nudged Darius's forearm, then turned his head toward the distant glow beyond the trees, where base lights shimmered faintly through the rain. Darius followed the look and swallowed. The trail marker was gone in the wet dark. His radio sat somewhere beneath him, silent. The creek had risen enough to hide the low path. Home was less than a mile away, maybe more, but distance changes when every step has to be borrowed from courage. The German shepherd stepped forward, then looked back. Waiting. Darius forced one knee under him, breathing through the effort, and braced one hand against the dog's shoulders. The K9 lowered himself just enough, steady as a rail. Together they rose. Not beautifully. Not cleanly. Darius stumbled once and nearly went down again, but the dog shifted his weight under him, catching the motion before it became a fall. The tag swung under the collar, tapping against Darius's wrist. Tap, 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 like a quiet clock counting them toward something neither of them understood yet. They moved slowly through the trees, the Marine leaning on the dog and the dog choosing every step as if the mud itself had to be negotiated. Rain ticked off leaves. Water slid into Darius's boots. His uniform clung heavy to his shoulders. Each breath came with effort, but each time he slowed, the dog looked back with those amber eyes, not begging, not commanding, simply believing he could take one more step. That belief did more than strength could. It pulled Darius forward. After 100 yards, the trail opened into a narrow service road glistening beneath the storm. The base lights were clearer now, warm and distant, shining beyond the fence line like porch lamps after a long deployment. Darius paused, one hand still buried in the white fur at the dog's neck. The tag turned in the rain, and for the first time, he saw scratches beneath the mud, letters pressed into metal. Before he could read them, the dog lifted his head toward home and started walking again. Darius followed because he had no choice, and because somewhere deep in him, beneath pain and rain and pride, he trusted that this dog knew exactly where he was taking him. The service road bent south toward the edge of Camp Lejeune, slick with rain and lined by low ditches that glimmered like strips of black glass. Darius moved one careful step at a time, his hand resting in the white shepherd's fur, not gripping now but trusting. The dog had become the pace of the world. When he slowed, Darius breathed. When he stepped forward, Darius followed. The rain softened for a moment, turning from a hard curtain into a fine mist that hung between the pine trunks, and through it the base lights appeared and vanished, like a promise trying to stay visible through pain. Darius tried to count the distance to the gate, but numbers slipped from him. 200 yards. Maybe 500. Maybe a mile. His left boot dragged once through shallow water, and the dog stopped immediately, turning his head with calm concern. "I am good," Darius whispered, though both of them knew it was not fully true. The shepherd stepped closer and pressed his shoulder against Darius's thigh, steady and warm beneath the soaked coat. That small act nearly broke something open inside the Marine. He had been strong for so long that accepting help felt like speaking a language he had forgotten. After the training injury that put him on light duty, he had smiled through every medical check, nodded through every cautious warning, and told every concerned voice that he was fine. Fine had become his uniform after the uniform came off. But this dog did not ask him to pretend. He only stood there in the rain and offered his body like a bridge. They continued toward the base housing road, leaving the service trail behind for the narrow lane that ran along the outer fence. A few porch lights glowed beyond the wire, blurred by rain. Somewhere far off, a generator hummed. The air smelled of wet pine needles, roadside gravel, and the faint salt of the coast. Darius's quarters were in a small row of older base homes reserved for recovering personnel and temporary assignments, simple brick units with trimmed lawns and American flags fastened near the doors. He had moved there 2 months earlier after being cleared to return from medical leave, though some nights the house felt less like home and more like a waiting room between who he had been and who he was trying to become. The dog seemed to know the place before Darius pointed. At the turn near a row of mailboxes, the shepherd stopped, lifted his nose, and chose the path toward Darius's unit with startling certainty. Darius stared at him. "You have been here before?" The dog only glanced back, amber eyes shining under wet lashes, then continued. By the time they reached the small front porch, Darius's breath had turned ragged. He leaned against the railing, rain dripping from his jaw, and fumbled for the key tucked inside the pocket of his jacket. His fingers would not cooperate. The dog waited at his side, still as a statue except for the rise and fall of his chest. The metal tag under the collar tapped against the porch step. Tap, tap. Darius looked down, and this time the porch light caught the letters clearly. Not a name at first. A message. He blinked rain from his eyes and bent closer. The tag was old, its edges worn smooth, but someone had engraved the words by hand on the back, "Take him home when he forgets the way." Darius stopped breathing for a second. The rain, the porch, the pain in his body, all of it seemed to pull away. "Take him home when he forgets the way." His hand trembled as he turned the tag over. The front carried a name, Blaze. Beneath it, smaller, almost hidden beneath a scratch, were 2 initials. M.H. Darius knew those initials. Marcus Hayes. His father. A retired Marine handler who had passed away 3 years ago, leaving behind old photographs, a folded flag, and stories Darius had been too young to fully understand. Stories about a white shepherd his father had trained before illness made him leave the program early. A dog that had been reassigned, then lost somewhere in the paperwork. A dog his father had talked about near the end with a sadness Darius mistook for memory. The shepherd looked up at him, and the years between boyhood and this rain-soaked porch narrowed into one impossible thread. "Blaze," Darius whispered. The dog's ears lifted. His tail moved once, slow and certain. Darius sank carefully onto the porch step, not from weakness alone, but from the force of recognition. The dog stepped close, lowered his head, and pressed his muzzle against Darius's chest. Not like a stranger. Not like a rescue. Like someone returning a son to a promise made by his father. Inside the house, the porch light flickered over an old framed photograph visible through the front window, Darius in dress blues beside Marcus Hayes, both men smiling stiffly at a promotion ceremony years ago. Blaze saw it too. His body stilled. His amber eyes fixed on the image, and a low breath left him, almost a sigh. Darius reached for the door again, this time with steadier hands. The key turned. Warm air spilled out, carrying the faint smell of coffee, cedar polish, and the old leather chair Darius had inherited from his father. Blaze waited at the threshold, water dripping from his white coat onto the mat, as if asking permission to enter a place he somehow already knew. Darius looked at the tag once more, then at the dog who had guided him through the rain. "Come home," he said softly. And Blaze stepped inside. Inside the small house, the warmth of dry air wrapped around Darius as he closed the door behind him, carrying Blaze carefully onto the worn rug by the front window. The sound of rain outside softened to a light tapping against the roof, and the scent of cedar polish, old books, and faint coffee filled the room. Blaze shook once, sending droplets onto the mat, then pressed close to Darius, amber eyes scanning every corner with a calm alertness, ears twitching toward the distant hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of floorboards. Darius sank into the chair by the window, legs still weak, back leaning against the cool wooden frame, and allowed himself a long exhale. His hand moved instinctively to the dog's neck, feeling the damp fur warm under his fingers, the tag resting lightly against his palm. He read the engraving again. "Take him home when he forgets the way." M.H. Blaze nudged the hand lightly, reminding him that the journey was not over, that each breath and motion had to be measured, and Darius obeyed, following the guidance of instinct and trust. He shuffled toward the small kitchen table, wet boots leaving faint streaks on the floor, and placed the tag next to a folded envelope, an old note from his father that he had discovered weeks earlier, a message he had not yet understood, now illuminated by the presence of the dog. Blaze sat beside the chair, head resting lightly against Darius's leg, listening to the quiet of the house, the occasional distant bird outside, the faint creak of the window sash as the breeze stirred it. Darius opened the envelope slowly, letting the words of his father mingle with the reality of Blaze sitting beside him, a living proof of a promise kept across years. The dog's gaze remained steady, amber eyes bright and focused, as if reading between the lines of the letter, understanding the connection Darius had only begun to feel. Hours passed with the two of them in the stillness, Darius sorting through old photos of his father training K9s, letters folded carefully with the envelopes, and Blaze moving occasionally, adjusting his position to be closer, pressing a paw softly against Darius's knee, guiding him toward focus and patience. Every so often, the dog would look toward the front window, ears perking at the faintest sound of vehicles or footsteps outside, then return his attention to Darius, reinforcing the sense of watchful protection and quiet companionship. By late afternoon, sunlight filtered through wet glass panes, casting long rectangles of gold and gray across the wooden floor. Darius ran a hand through his damp hair, tracing the lines of the tag and remembering every step from the flooded trail to the service road and finally home. Blaze shifted slightly, standing and pacing gently around the small living area, then returning to rest his head on Darius's lap, amber eyes glimmering with quiet intelligence. The bond between man and dog had grown taut and tested across miles of rain, mud, and uncertainty, and now it rested in the safety of the small house, in the warmth and calm of the returned home, each heartbeat and breath a testament to loyalty and trust. Darius spoke softly, almost to himself. "We made it, Blaze. We made it home." The dog's tail thumped lightly in response, a simple, rhythmic acknowledgement, and his amber eyes reflected a deep understanding, a silent conversation of years, missions, and promises kept. Outside, the clouds began to break, the sky clearing toward evening, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and distant ocean salt. Darius allowed himself a small smile, the tension in his shoulders easing, while Blaze shifted to lie fully beside him, head resting on the rug, chest rising and falling with calm, steady breaths. The letter, the tag, the presence of Blaze, and the quiet of the home created a space where the past met the present and where loyalty had bridged years and distance, leaving Darius with a profound sense of peace and the understanding that some journeys end not in noise or spectacle, but in the quiet certainty of home, companionship, and the fulfillment of promises whispered long ago. The evening settled over the base housing road with a softness that made the storm feel almost distant, though rain still clung to the window screens and gathered in bright beads along the porch rail. Darius sat at the kitchen table with one lamp on, the old envelope opened beside his father's letter, Blaze stretched across the rug near his boots, white for drying in uneven waves. The house was quiet in a way that made small sounds matter. The clock over the stove clicked once every second. Water dripped from Darius's jacket onto the laundry room tile. Blaze's tag rested on the table beside the letter, catching the warm light each time Darius shifted. Take him home when he forgets the way. The words had seemed simple on the porch, almost gentle. Now, sitting under the yellow lamp with his father's handwriting in front of him, Darius understood they were not only about the dog. They were about him too. He unfolded the second page of the letter with careful fingers. His father's writing was steady, slightly slanted, the ink faded at the creases. Son, if Blaze ever finds you, do not treat it like coincidence. Some dogs remember what men spend years trying to bury. Darius stopped there, his throat tightening. Blaze lifted his head, as if he had heard the sentence inside the silence. The dog's amber eyes were calm, but not sleepy. Waiting. Darius read on. I trained him for search work, but he trained me in patience. When my body started failing, he knew before the doctors said it plainly. When I got lost in pain, he brought me back to the chair, the porch, the light. If he comes to you, it means he saw something in you that looked like the same road. Darius leaned back slowly, the chair creaking under him. Outside, a truck passed on the wet street, tires whispering over asphalt. The base lights blinked through the curtains, steady and ordinary, but the room felt charged with something deeper than memory. His father had known. Maybe not the exact night, not the rain, not the moment Darius would fall on a muddy trail and be too proud to call for help. But Marcus Hayes had known the shape of his son's struggle. The Marine who smiled in photographs, who taught Darius how to lace boots, how to stand straight, how to shake hands firmly, had also known what it meant to be quietly afraid of weakness. Darius looked down at his hands. They were still trembling. Not from cold now. From being seen by a man no longer alive and a dog who had refused to let the message die with him. Blaze stood carefully, crossed the room, and placed one paw beside the chair. Then he nudged the letter with his nose. Darius almost laughed, but the sound came out broken and soft. You are pushy for a guest, he whispered. Blaze blinked unmoved. Darius read the final lines. There will come a day when you think home is a place you have to earn by being strong enough to reach it alone. That is not true. Home is where mercy meets you on the road and walks the last mile with you. Let the dog help. Let people help. Do not make pride your final address. Darius bowed his head. For a long while, he did not move. The rain outside had stopped completely, leaving only the smell of wet pine coming through a cracked window and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Blaze pressed his muzzle against Darius's knee, not demanding, not comforting too loudly, only staying. That was what undid him. Not the tag. Not the impossible timing. Not even the words his father had left behind. It was the staying. Darius rested one hand on the dog's head, feeling warmth beneath the damp fur, feeling the old discipline in Blaze's stillness. He sent you, Darius said. Blaze's tail moved once against the rug. Darius wiped his face with the heel of his hand and looked toward the hallway where his medical appointment card was stuck to a corkboard, the one he had nearly thrown away that morning. Physical therapy at 0800. Counseling intake at 1300. He had planned to skip the second one. He had planned to keep carrying the weight by himself until no one noticed how heavy it had become. Blaze turned his head toward the hallway, then back at Darius, as if following the thought. Darius breathed in, slow and unsteady. "All right," he said. "I will go." The dog lowered himself beside the chair again, satisfied in a quiet, stubborn way. Darius folded the letter along its original creases and placed it beside the tag. The lamp glow turned the old metal gold. In that small kitchen on a damp North Carolina evening, a wounded Marine, a white K9, and a dead father's message became part of the same promise. Not a loud miracle. Not the kind that shakes windows or fills rooms with witnesses. Just one dog at the door, one son finally listening, and one sentence that changed the meaning of home. Morning light seeped slowly through the blinds, painting stripes across the kitchen floor where Darius and Blaze had spent the long night together, the storm now only a memory pressed against the roof and windows. Darius stirred on the chair, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders and legs, the remnants of yesterday's fatigue lingering as he glanced down at the white German shepherd stretched across the rug, ears twitching at distant birds, and the hum of the refrigerator. Blaze had not moved much, conserving warmth, alert yet calm, amber eyes catching each glint of sunlight that filtered into the room. The tag under Blaze's collar rested on the table, next to the folded letter from Marcus Hayes, catching small shafts of gold as dust motes floated lazily in the air. Darius reached over to touch the tag again, running a finger over the engraved words, "Take him home when he forgets the way," feeling the weight of his father's intentions woven into metal, a legacy he had never expected to understand so fully. Blaze shifted slightly, pressing his head against Darius's knee, and the Marine felt a faint warmth, not just from the dog, but from a sense of continuity, of purpose restored. He thought about the journey from the flooded trail to the porch, the careful steps guided by Blaze's body and eyes, and the message that had survived, delivered not by words, but by pause and steadfast attention. Breakfast was a slow, deliberate affair. Darius poured coffee and milk for himself, careful not to spill on the wet patches where Blaze's coat had shed water, while placing a bowl of warm water and a small portion of dry food before the dog. Blaze drank, but only enough to satisfy immediate thirst, lifting his head periodically to check that Darius was still present, still safe, still paying attention. Outside, the sun rose higher, illuminating the yard and spreading golden light through the thin mist that lingered from the previous day's rain. The air smelled of pine, damp earth, and the faint tang of metal from the porch railing. Darius moved slowly to tidy the room, folding the blanket Blaze had rested on, picking up the tag, and setting it carefully back beside the letter. He paused by the window, noticing the base road beyond, the faint outline of vehicles moving along the distant path, the world continuing without the urgency of yesterday, yet imbued with the lessons it had delivered. Blaze followed him, tail low but steady, amber eyes tracking each motion, an almost imperceptible pressure guiding Darius to remain calm, deliberate, mindful of the rhythm of their shared space. Letters, photographs, and small keepsakes from his father's desk called to him now, each one a reminder of past guidance and the wisdom carried forward by a dog who had remembered what men sometimes forget. Darius sank back into the chair with a notebook, pen in hand, beginning to write observations, reflections, and small notes about Blaze's behavior, the tag, and the emotional weight it carried. Blaze rested at his side, occasionally nudging the notebook as if encouraging him to continue, a subtle communication that transcended words. The morning unfolded slowly, punctuated by soft sounds, the creak of floorboards, the gentle tapping of rain still clinging to the window, the rustle of papers as Darius moved them for clarity, and Blaze's steady breathing. A metronome marking the passage of time, stability, and reassurance. Darius paused, closed his eyes, and exhaled, Feeling the tension drain from his shoulders, the quiet affirmation of home and trust settling over him. Blaze rose, stretched, and approached the table, sniffing the tag lightly, then resting his head against the edge, amber eyes bright and attentive. Darius reached out, running his hand along the dog's neck, feeling the pulse of life, the unwavering dedication, and the quiet miracle of a companion who had guided him not only through physical distance and pain, but through the emotional journey of recognizing trust, legacy, and the meaning of home. Outside, the wind shifted, rustling pine needles and stirring the faint scent of the ocean air from the coast, bringing a sense of renewal. Darius stood slowly, brushing the hair from his damp jacket, taking in the room, the dog, and the tangible presence of his father's memory made real through Blaze. The tag, the letter, the white canine, and the quiet house formed a tapestry of care, loyalty, and subtle miracle, one that reminded Darius that some rescues were not just physical, but deeply emotional, lasting, and transformative. Blaze exhaled softly, a warm, low sound, settling fully onto the rug as Darius returned to his chair, pen poised above the notebook, ready to capture not only facts, but the resonance of an extraordinary bond that would guide both man and dog in the days to come. By 0700, the house had shifted from memory into motion, and Darius stood in the hallway with his medical appointment card in one hand and Blaze sitting beside the front door as if he had been assigned to guard the choice itself. Morning had turned clear over Camp Lejeune, the sky washed clean after the storm, with sunlight sliding across wet lawns and bright drops still hanging from the porch rail. Darius wore a fresh uniform, boots polished but not perfect, shoulders squared in the mirror though his body still carried the ache of the night before. For a moment, he stared at his own reflection and almost heard the old answer rise in him. Tell them you are fine. Keep it simple. Keep it tight. Then Blaze stood, slow and quiet, and the tag beneath his collar gave one small sound. Tap. Darius looked down. The message on that metal had not changed, but its meaning had followed him into morning. Take him home when he forgets the way. He reached for the door. All right, he said softly. We go together. Blaze stepped onto the porch first, his white coat bright against the damp wood, amber eyes scanning the road with calm discipline. The base neighborhood was waking around them. A pickup backing from a driveway, a flag lifting in the light breeze, the distant cadence of boots on pavement, someone laughing softly near a car before the sound faded into the day. Everything was ordinary, and that made it harder. Storms are easy to respect when they are loud. The quiet ones hide in routine. Darius walked with measured steps toward the medical building, Blaze at his left side, not pulling, not wandering, simply matching him. A young corporal passing on the sidewalk slowed when he saw them. Beautiful dog, Corporal Hayes, he said. Darius nodded. He found me. The corporal smiled, assuming it was a joke, and kept walking. Darius did not explain. Some truths were too sacred to hand over casually. At the clinic, the automatic doors opened to the smell of floor cleaner, paper cups, and coffee from a machine in the corner. A receptionist looked up, then down at Blaze. Service animal, she asked gently. Darius hesitated. Blaze sat without command, straight-backed and steady, the picture of patient purpose. In every way that matters, Darius said. The receptionist studied the dog's calm posture, then the medical card in Darius's hand, and her expression softened. Have a seat. I will let Captain Lewis know you are here. The waiting room was almost empty. A television murmured low with morning news no one watched. Darius chose a chair near the wall. Blaze lowered himself at his feet, head resting against Darius's boot, the metal tag turned outward where the light could touch it. Darius felt the old pressure building in his chest as the counseling appointment drew closer. Physical therapy, he understood. Pain could be measured, stretched, strengthened. The other kind asked for words, and words could open doors he had spent years bracing shut. When Captain Lewis called his name, Darius stood too fast and winced. Blaze rose with him, shoulder brushing his leg. The captain was a woman in her 40s with silver at her temples and a voice that had learned not to hurry wounded people. She glanced at Blaze, then at the tag, then at Darius. Looks like you brought backup. Darius swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Her office was simple, with 2 chairs, a small desk, and a window facing a row of wet pines. Blaze settled between Darius's boots, close enough that Darius could feel warmth through the leather. Captain Lewis did not begin with a clipboard. She let the silence breathe. Finally, she said, "Tell me about the dog." Darius looked down at Blaze. The shepherd's amber eyes were half closed, but his ears were listening. "He belonged to my father," Darius said. "Or maybe my father belonged to him. I am still figuring that out." Captain Lewis waited. Darius took the tag from Blaze's collar and held it in his palm. The metal was warm now from the dog's body. "Last night, I got turned around on the training trail. I thought I could handle more than I could. He found me, brought me home. Then I read the message." His voice grew quieter on the last word. Captain Lewis leaned forward just a little. "What did it say?" Darius read it aloud, and the room changed. Not visibly. The pines still dripped outside. The clock still moved. Blaze still breathed at his feet. But something inside Darius gave way, not like collapse, more like a locked gate opening after years of weather. "I think my father knew I would need help," he said. "I think he knew I would hate needing it." Captain Lewis nodded, her eyes kind but steady. "And today you came anyway." Darius looked at Blaze. The dog opened his eyes, calm and certain, as if this too was part of the path home. "Today I came anyway," Darius repeated. The words did not fix everything. They did not erase pain, grief, or pride. But they stood there in the room, honest and alive, and for the first time in a long while, Darius did not feel smaller for saying them. He felt less alone. Blaze pressed one paw lightly against his boot, and Darius rested his hand on the dog's head, letting the silence hold them both like a blessing. By late morning, the sunlight had grown warmer, spilling across the floorboards and glinting in the white fur of Blaze as he stretched lightly beside Darius in the living room. The Marine stood by the window, watching the wind ripple the wet pine trees, the scent of rain still lingering faintly through the cracked window, carrying the brine from the distant ocean. Blaze moved closer, nudging Darius with a soft head press, as if reminding him that some journeys were meant to be shared silently. Darius sank back into the couch, coffee in hand, the warmth seeping into his chilled fingers as he looked down at the dog, amber eyes reflecting sunlight and calm purpose. Outside, the base hummed quietly with morning activity, distant voices, a vehicle rolling over wet asphalt, a bird calling from a faraway branch. Inside, the calm was deliberate, weighted with the understanding that the night's journey had not only been a physical passage, but an emotional passage as well. Darius picked up the tag from Blaze's collar again, feeling the engraved letters under his fingers, and traced them slowly. "Take him home when he forgets the way. N.H." He paused, letting the significance sink in. The words were more than a command. They were a bridge between past and present, a lesson in patience, trust, and the quiet courage of those who serve and those who wait. Blaze pressed closer, sensing the tension that lingered in the Marine's shoulders, and exhaled a slow, steady breath, encouraging Darius to meet it. The envelope from his father lay open on the table, the letter inside, still carefully unfolded, words carrying across time to illuminate the present. Some lessons require living to understand, some guidance comes on pause rather than voices. Some love is carried in silence and steadfast loyalty. Darius read and reread each line, each time finding new resonance as Blaze rested his head on Darius's knee, amber eyes calm yet vigilant, tail moving in small, deliberate sweeps across the floor. The day's chores called softly from another room, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of papers shifting with the wind, the occasional creak of floorboards, but Darius felt the rhythm of home for the first time in weeks, grounded in the presence of Blaze and the lessons carried by the tag. He rose slowly, stretching shoulders stiff from the night's journey, and Blaze followed, pacing with him as they moved to the kitchen, the morning light highlighting each movement, each careful step. A reminder that patience and steady guidance often bridge the distance between fear and trust. Darius poured water for Blaze and set down a small portion of food, and the dog ate calmly, occasionally glancing up at him, amber eyes steady, reminding Darius that companionship is measured not only in acts of courage, but in moments of quiet attention. He thought of the flooded trail, the dark creek, the rain-soaked mud, the way Blaze had led him home without a word, without complaint, relying on instinct and loyalty to navigate both danger and uncertainty. That same loyalty now rested in the calm of the room, in the steady gaze of a dog who had carried both a man and a message across miles and hours, turning fear into understanding and uncertainty into trust. Darius moved to the couch, notebook in hand, pen poised, intending to capture his reflections, observations, and gratitude, while Blaze settled at his side, occasionally nudging the pen or the notebook as if to guide the words into the proper rhythm. The air held a soft warmth from the rising sun, filtered through the pine-scented breeze, and the quiet of the house became a stage for subtle lessons in connection, resilience, and the power of a single act of fidelity to alter the course of a day, a mind, a heart. Darius wrote slowly, each word deliberate, each pause measured, while Blaze rested, exhaling with a calmness that filled the room with reassurance. Outside, the wind moved across the trees, lifting the scent of rain and earth, carrying it into the room as if to remind them both of the world beyond the walls, while also emphasizing the sanctuary that had been created through perseverance, trust, and unwavering companionship. Darius looked down at Blaze, amber eyes meeting his own, and felt the gravity of the journey, the miracle of arrival, and the enduring presence of loyalty embodied in the dog at his side. The notebook remained open, the pen still in hand, and the two shared the quiet understanding that some stories are measured not in action alone, but in patience, presence, and the subtle, sustaining power of being guided home by a steadfast companion. The late afternoon light stretched across the floor of Darius's living room, casting long stripes from the blinds onto Blaze's white coat, highlighting faint streaks of dried rain and giving his fur a gentle glow. Darius sat in his chair, notebook open on the table, pen poised, but paused as he watched Blaze shift to a more comfortable position, curling slightly yet keeping his head raised and ears alert. Outside, the wind stirred the pines softly, carrying the scent of salt and wet earth from the nearby coast, mixing with the warmth of the house and the faint aroma of leftover coffee. Darius exhaled slowly, letting the calm settle over him after the intense journey of the night before, the trek through the mud, the rain, and finally the porch where Blaze had delivered him home. Each detail of that journey lingered vividly, the tap of the tag against the railing, the way Blaze had positioned his body to steady Darius, the certainty in amber eyes that never wavered, even when every instinct told a Marine to be alone. Now, in the quiet light, those same eyes reflected understanding, awareness, and loyalty. Darius reached down and rested a hand on the dog's head, feeling the warmth and the subtle heartbeat beneath his fingers, remembering the engraved words on the tag, "Take him home when he forgets the way." He traced the letters again, aware that the message was more than instructions. It was a bridge across time, between his father's intent and the living, breathing guide at his side. Blaze shifted slightly, nudging Darius's hand with his nose, reminding him that some guidance is silent and some lessons are taught in movement, in presence, in patience. Darius felt a quiet smile rise as he remembered the flooded trail, the service road, the porch, and the way the storm had not just tested his body, but had revealed the depth of trust and interdependence between man and dog. He looked down at Blaze's eyes, and the subtle amber glow in the late light seemed to carry understanding, a reminder that courage does not always roar and that miracles are sometimes measured in small, steady steps. The notebook in front of Darius remained open, the pen resting gently, waiting for the words he had been too caught up in to form. He watched Blaze stretch once, rolling onto his side, legs extended just enough to shift weight evenly, eyes never leaving him, every muscle tuned for vigilance and support. Outside, The bass hummed quietly with life, distant vehicles, muted voices, and the faint sound of a bird calling somewhere in the trees, each blending into the soft cadence of domestic rhythm. Darius exhaled, letting his shoulders relax, and began to write slowly, noting Blaze's behaviors, his own reactions, the sequence of the night's events, and the lessons contained in the dog's calm insistence. Blaze shifted closer again, resting his head against Darius's knee, and the Marine felt the depth of connection, a sense of safety and continuity that no words could fully capture. The light outside softened further, turning golden across the room, illuminating the tag on the table beside the notebook, making the metal glow warmly and connecting the past, present, and future in a single glance. Darius paused in his writing, lifting his eyes to the dog, whose tail thumped lightly once, a subtle affirmation, steady and deliberate. The house seemed to breathe around them, holding the echoes of the storm, the journey, and the quiet revelation that had come through loyalty, trust, and the simple but profound act of guiding a Marine home. Blaze exhaled a low, even breath, closing his eyes momentarily, then lifting his head to glance toward the window as if to mark the passing day, the continuity of care, and the gentle miracle of a bond that had carried both of them from uncertainty into calm certainty. Darius lowered his hand to rest fully on the dog's neck, feeling the warmth, the pulse, and the presence that had guided him through rain and mud and into a place of understanding. Together, they sat in the late afternoon light, a Marine and his K9 companion, the tag resting nearby, the notebook open, and the room filled with the quiet power of endurance, fidelity, and the small, sustaining miracles that come from being seen, being guided, and being understood. Evening settled over Camp Lejeune with a soft, golden light filtering through the window blinds, painting the living room in long stripes that highlighted Blaze's white coat as he stretched beside Darius. The Marine had finished writing his reflections in the notebook, pages filled with the memory of last night's journey, the tag, and the letter from his father, each line a bridge connecting past, present, and the quiet miracles that had carried him home. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying a faint salt tang from the distant ocean, mixing with the warm, domestic scents of coffee, cedar polish, and worn upholstery inside the house. Blaze lifted his head occasionally, amber eyes attentive, observing the subtle shifts in Darius's posture and the occasional creak of floorboards, as if to remind him that vigilance and care need not be loud to be profound. Darius leaned back in his chair, letting a slow exhale roll past lips that had forgotten the ease of deep breaths, feeling the tension of pride, pain, and solitude melting into the steady presence of his companion. The tag on Blaze's collar caught the last rays of the sun, reflecting warm light onto the notebook where Darius had captured the story of their journey, the flooded trail, the rain-slicked service road, the porch, the tag, the message, and the unwavering guidance that had carried him every step. Blaze nudged the notebook lightly with his nose, amber eyes locking with Darius's as if offering affirmation that every word and pause mattered, that presence is as instructive as action, that loyalty is more often shown in subtle persistence than in dramatic gesture. The room smelled faintly of wet fur, dry wood, and paper, a combination that grounded Darius as he shifted to scratch behind Blaze's ears, feeling the rhythm of breath and heartbeat that had been the steady guide through the storm. Outside, the sky softened from gold to pale orange, the shadows lengthening across the pine-lined yard, each needle trembling with the last whispers of wind. Darius rose, stretching slowly, joints stiff but cooperating, and Blaze followed, tail low but steady, padding silently beside him as they moved to the kitchen. A bowl of fresh water was placed before the dog, along with a small portion of food, and Blaze ate slowly, glancing up at Darius occasionally, amber eyes catching every subtle movement, each pause a lesson in calm observation and patient engagement. Darius washed the last traces of rain from his jacket in the sink, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the occasional bird calling outside. Realizing that the journey that began in darkness and fear had transformed into this steady rhythm of home, presence, and shared understanding. He returned to the living room, notebook in hand once more, writing observations of Blaze's behavior, noting the dog's unwavering attention, the timing of nudges and shifts, the almost imperceptible cues that had guided him safely home and through the emotional weight of understanding his father's legacy. Blaze rested beside him, sometimes shifting to nudge a page or brush against a knee, amber eyes bright and intelligent, a living chronicle of trust, guidance, and quiet courage. The sunlight faded to deepening hues, casting a warm, protective glow across the room as Darius wrote, sometimes pausing to look at the tag again, feeling the engraved words resonate with every heartbeat. Take him home when he forgets the way. M.H. The meaning of those words had expanded beyond instruction. They now symbolized the link between father, son, and dog, a chain of loyalty and care crossing years and circumstances, bringing safety and wisdom in its wake. Blaze exhaled softly, settling fully onto the rug, his amber eyes closing briefly, then opening once more, attentive but relaxed, signaling that the journey was not just physical but emotional, and that presence, fidelity, and patience were the quiet miracles that could transform both the messenger and the one guided. Darius allowed himself to smile, the first true, unburdened smile in days, feeling the weight of pride and fear lift, replaced by understanding and the enduring warmth of trust. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of the ocean and pine, rustling the edges of blinds and marking the passage of time, while inside the house, the Marine and the white German shepherd shared the calm aftermath of a journey completed, a story remembered, and a bond affirmed. The tag rested nearby, notebook open, pages capturing the memory and reflections, and Blaze exhaled another steady breath, signaling that home was not a place but a presence, a companion, a quiet miracle made tangible through pause, patience, and unwavering loyalty. Together they sat, Darius and Blaze, in the gentle glow of evening, the house filled with warmth, the air carrying both the echoes of rain and the subtle cadence of hearts aligned in understanding, completing the circle from fear, uncertainty, and distance to home, trust, and shared life.